the hypothetical example, they've got a Victorian license, but they're buying investment properties for clients in Brisbane, and they're not even licensed up there to do so, but they think it's okay because the client that they're buying for is Victorian based.
Goodness, there's been so much confusion within our industry around this. And, as the REBA president, I can honestly say that the number of applicants that have applied for REBA membership that have been declined on this very point, people think that they don't need a local license to be purchasing in the state that they're buying into, and that's not true. Now, it becomes a little bit muddied with the mutual recognition licensing arrangements that are now in place, but it's important for everybody to know that that does not apply to every single state. So in the scenario that you've raised there, Ben, if someone holds a Victorian license and they're purchasing here in Queensland, actually you cannot rely on any mutual recognition. You need a Queensland license that's going to be separate to your Victorian license. And therefore, if you are representing a buyer in a real estate transaction, and that could involve anything from inspecting the property, appraising the property, negotiating on behalf of someone for that property, these are all considered services that would require a license and would trigger that requirement for a license. So if you're doing that and you don't hold a local license, you're acting outside of the law, and technically you would not be entitled to any payment for those professional services rendered. Unfortunately, it's the consumer that's not actually aware of this. The other thing that I notice, and again, if we're using Queensland as the example, a lot of interstate buyers agents that are purchasing here in Queensland don't understand the legislative requirements in relation to the paperwork that needs to be completed as a buyer representative. We have appointment forms that must be completed to enable you to be paid. Otherwise, as a consumer, you simply would not have to pay. If a licensed real estate agent or licensed buyer's agent does not actually complete the required paperwork and have their client sign, then there's no requirement for that client to ever pay them for the services rendered. So it has ramifications at all levels. There's professional indemnity insurance ramifications, there's client protection ramifications, there's the ability for that individual or business to be paid for their professional services. I would say that no one deserves to be paid if they're operating outside of the law. So, that part of it concerns me less, but I certainly have concerns for the consumer that really is the one that ultimately is most exposed in these sorts of transactions.
So Mel, in sort of rounding that out, what would be the sort of 3 or 4 things or questions as a consumer that I should be asking my buyer's agency business or individual that might be working for me to know that they are compliant or that they're qualified to do the work that I want them to do? Is there 2 or 3 nice little sort of questions that you could pose to our community so they can get ready and prepped to ask those questions when they get spruiked through social media to come and use this buyer's agent to buy in whoop whoop, because they can make a quick buck?
Look, I think one of the biggest questions is, are they adequately licensed? And unfortunately, with some of the businesses that are evolving and the explosion in the size of some of the businesses that are in this space, it's very hard to actually understand, well, who is doing what and for what part of the service. But, as a consumer, you have a right to know, if you're assigned a buyer's agent, you should actually have a right to ask to see their license in the state that you're purchasing that property in, because everyone should hold that license if they are representing a buyer. The second thing is, as a consumer, you want to protect yourself, and the way to do that is to ensure that the buyer's agent that you're partnering with has professional indemnity insurance in the event that something goes wrong and that you're raising a claim. I think that it's so important to the buyer's agent community also to understand that there's so many professional indemnity policies out there that exclude property investment advice as an inclusion within their cover. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that is the case. So as a consumer, if you're actually seeking investment advice from your buyer's agent, I'd be wanting to ensure that their professional indemnity insurance covers you for the advice that they're giving you, because if it doesn't, then that's another red flag for us. And I'd also be wanting to know whether they are disclosing any third-party kickbacks. Because, again, professional buyer's agents, there is a disclosure regime in every state whereby you can disclose if you are receiving any kickbacks. And as a consumer, I would want to know that that is the case so that I can assess whether there is a conflict or not in recommendations that may be given. So, for example, within our business, we refer a lot of our clients to conveyancers, to building and pest inspectors, to property managers. Now, we choose not to accept any referral fees from third parties like this, but instead we ask those providers to pass on discounts to our clients. There are some other providers that will take kickbacks. A lot of those will be hidden. And as a consumer, I'd feel pretty ripped off if my buyer's agent referred me to a third party, not because they're going to act in my best interest, but because there was a financial incentive involved. So they're probably the biggest three that I'd focus on, really to dig deep about your buyer's agent.